What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Kinda Different, a podcast where we talk about innovation in dental care. We connect with some of the best guests that are out there, absolutely just amazing people. And we talk together about how we can make dental care more human. I'm Dr. Matt Allen, CEO and co-founder of DifferentKind and your host for Kinda Different. And I am absolutely super excited for this conversation today. Dr. Jan Jaffer from TREC Dental in Calgary, Canada, second Canadian guest we've ever had. So, thank you for joining us from the Great White North. We certainly appreciate it. Really excited to have this conversation today because I think you and your organization embody so many of the things that we talk about on Kinda Different. I would love for you to kick us off by introducing us to yourself, to TREC Dental, and we'll get into it.
Well, hey, Matt, thanks for having me. I mean, I'm excited to be here because, again, some of the stuff that you're doing, I think, there's a different way to do dentistry. And I think it's fun to talk about stuff that you're passionate about. And this is absolutely, a passion of mine. TREC Dental, here in Calgary, we have 18 practices, 16 GP, 2 pediatric practices. I've been fortunate enough to have a dad that was a dentist and a mom that was one of the best office managers you could have and really understand how the business works. And so, I joined them 21 years ago. So I went to UOP down in San Francisco for dental school, was fortunate enough to do that 2+3 program. So at 22, I was out. I was ready to practice dentistry at 22. And, not a lot of people are going to hire a 22-year-old grad except your father, right? That's amazing. So I had a job, worked with mom and dad. And, when we started, we had one practice. They'd been running a practice here in Calgary in the Northwest. And they opened that practice in 1981. And so we've had that practice for now 42 years. I joined them one practice and, the growth has been amazing. We've been really lucky as an organization to find amazing people to work with and amazing partners. And so we have 18 partners, 18 clinics, and it's grown in the last 20 years from 1 to 18.
Yeah. Love it, man. That's, I know we're going to get into some of how that has happened and whatnot. But I think we have to start, as we talk about innovation, I think people, when they talk about innovation in dental care, immediately go to technology, right? And you have a sign behind you that says values-based, socially conscious dentistry, which I absolutely love. How is your model? You've grown from 1 to 18 practices in your time there. Obviously, what you're doing is working on a lot of levels. How is being values-based and socially conscious innovative in the dental world?
Yeah, so I think a big thing for us, so when we say, you got a little TREC thing here. When we say TREC, we have 4 values. So we have teamwork, respect, exceptional dentistry, and continuous improvement. And we actually believe that they go in that order. The teamwork comes first, respect comes second, and then we got to do the dentistry. Because here's the thing, I'm sure where you are, where we are, there's a dentist on every corner of the street. So there's no lack of dentists in town. Mm-hmm. So the expectation is people do good quality dentistry. I would like to think my peers in industry do good quality work, and they do. I mean, there's a lot of great dentists out there. Yeah. So what makes us different? It's the focus on team. It's the focus on respect. It's the focus on continuous improvement, and then the socially conscious work that we do in industry. And so for us, we spend a lot of time working on team. And that to me is ultimately our focus because we believe, I think Richard Branson said it best, hey, take care of your team, they'll take care of the clients. Mm-hmm. And that's how we believe it to be true. And so one of the things that we do as an organization is we close each office 3 days a year to just work on team. And I'll do most of the work with the team, but it'll be team-based and then socially responsible-based. And so what we're really focusing on is not how to do a better crown prep, not how to put a rubber dam on better, not how to make a temporary better, but like what is it that we're doing to work better? So one of the things we did recently was we went to this organization called Made by Mamas. And so they make food for new moms that can't afford stuff. So I ran a morning of active listening, positive mindset, like how we come into conversation, because what I truly believe is when I meet somebody or anybody meets anybody, they come in with, you're trying to screw me out of something versus this is going to be the best experience ever. You go to your mechanic. What do you think? They're going to steal your money. You go to the dentist. What do you think? They're going to steal your money. And so, changing our mindset on how we see things, how to listen, how to be more empathetic. And then our afternoon was cooking for new moms. And so it's like bridging that balance between teamwork and social responsibility. And guess what? Our team is more motivated to go back to work because of that. And so that's been a big part of what we've done is take our values, live them out, Because again, unfortunately, I believe a lot of organizations have these values on a wall. And that's the funniest thing. When you put the values on a wall, you truly don't believe them, because then you got to read them every day and pretend, right? Like, you got to know your values. You got to live your values every single day. And so trying to live out those values through what we do is really important to us.
Oh my gosh, man. I mean, there's so much there, right? And I think, the importance of, defining yourself, right, and actually living that, and knowing that you have that consistency across the team. I mean, I'm sure that pays huge dividends in so many ways. And you're super connected to your community, obviously, as well, and the needs of people there and whatnot. So, I think some people will try to give out of, kind of like, hey, I want to give, but I actually haven't figured out myself yet, right? And you've really figured out yourself. And then that allows you probably, I think, to give more effectively. And so I guess my question there is, what role do you see as your patients? And I would maybe define that even more broadly, and your community in having, a role in that innovation, right? It's not, it doesn't seem like it's just like, hey, here's what we do for you. It's like, hey, here's what we're doing together to produce, some kind of good. So kind of walk me through a little bit about how you see what the patient's role and the community's role is in that innovation as well.
Right. So I think that's a great question, because here's the thing. We don't exist without our patients, but we also don't exist without our team. And so making sure that we're part of the community and working with our team is just ultimately the most important thing that we can do. And we're lucky. I mean, I think if you're in the dentistry world, you're super lucky. We worked hard for it. We went to dental school. I mean, that's not easy, but we now have the opportunity to help others. And we have the opportunity to do well, because we live in an environment, we work in an environment that is virtually recession proof. And so we're successful, at the best of times. At the worst of times, we're still successful. At the best of times, we're really successful. And so we need to take that and do something with it. And what we've always said is that, we need to help the people around us, but help the people that need help, right? I mean, your average patient is probably doing okay, but there's going to be some people in your community that aren't, that are really struggling. And whether it's with their teeth, or whether it's just getting food, or whether it's shelter, I mean, there's just so many different things that happen. And so one of the things that we've really tried to do is make socially responsible giving easy. Because you either have time or you have money. You rarely have both. Yeah. And we know that for a lot of our team members, you're looking at assistants, you're looking at receptionists, you're looking at hygienists, they make decent money, but they're not making a ton of money going home. Yeah. And so how can we still make it easy for them to give back? And so one of the things I tell docs all the time, I was like, here's the easiest thing you can do. You ask your team, who wants to lose 5 or 10 pounds? It's like, everybody's like, I want to lose 5 or 10 pounds. And then we're like, in your closet. So go into your closet, let's get 5 or 10 pounds of clothing that you're no longer using. Let's put it together and let's donate it. And we have an organization in Calgary that we work closely with called Women's in Needs Shelter Wins. And here's the interesting thing. We take that stuff, we take it out of our closet, we put it in these garbage bags, and then we put it in the waiting room. And then our patients are like, why are there garbage bags in your waiting room? We're like, that's actually clothing. And they're like, okay. And they're like, and it's not just clothing. There's like, stuff like, there's lights and lamps and pictures and stuff that we don't need, but that people could use. And our patients are like, what, can we bring stuff? And we're like, absolutely. You can bring stuff. Like, we're getting, the pickup is in 3 weeks from now or 2 weeks from now. We put a little sign, here's our donation for Women's in Needs. And our patients start showing up with stuff. And it's like, this is that whole like little butterfly effect. Like, you start by removing a few things out of your closet you don't even need, right? Like, and it's actually helpful to our staff, because all of a sudden it's spring cleaning for them, right? Like, they clean out their closet, and all of a sudden it turns into something for the team, something for the community, something for our patients to get involved in, and it's easy. And what did it cost anybody? Nothing. There's no cost to that at all.
Totally.
It's just that little starting point that can make such a difference. And we've got like tons of examples of like different things that we do, but I always tell people that one, because I'm like, that's something you could go back and do with your team tomorrow. Like, you don't need to create a whole socially responsible organization. You could just start with like one simple thing.
100%. Wow. I mean, I absolutely love that example. And I am sure that you, again, probably could provide a ton more, because we want to give people actionable things that they can do, and not just frameworks, right? But, hey, like, here's a little thing that you can do to make a difference, right? You might not, ultimately be the kind of organization that TREC is, but here's something you could do tomorrow that will make a difference in the way that TREC makes a difference, right? So I love that. So let's move on to kind of connection. I think we've heard some of the things that are important to you, which I love when all of that shines through. But I specifically want to ask, I think the value of continuous improvement is such an interesting one, because it really closes the circle, right? Of, hey, we got to start with ourselves. We got to, really think about being respectful then with the patients. We got to do the dentistry part, and then we got to like continuously improve. But I think we can kind of imagine how that framework fits on us personally as well, right? Just even outside of dentistry or whatever. And so, yeah, my question for you right now is what specifically, outside, or I guess it could be related to work too, but what are you working on kind of continuously improving right now? Like what's something that's top of mind for you where you're like, hey, this is something that I'm at least just thinking about kind of consistently that's important to me?
Yeah, you know what? So I always go back to I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, and it's like, what's my why? And so motivating people to live well and give back. That's like my personal thing. So it's like I want healthy people that help the world. And so, to me, the focus is always like, how do we get people healthier? But how do I get myself healthier first? Because, to be completely honest, like things change over time, right? I mean, I used to, be in the gym 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. I owned a gym. Yeah. I used to be one of the trainers and a trainee. So I would work out. I train people on, not when I do dentistry, but every once in a while somebody wouldn't show up and I'd help out. But really it would focus me into being healthier. Yeah. And one of the conversations I always have with people is like, what's one of our biggest health concerns in the world right now? And I think, a lot of it will go down to overweight, cardiovascular disease. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest epidemics that we're having. And we can see that in the US and Canada. North America, it's big. I mean, Europe a little less, but North America, one of our biggest problems, cardiovascular disease, but really it's obesity is our biggest problem. And so I always joke with my team. I said, well, why do people get obese? Like what is it? And it's, lack of movement and lack of nutrition, right? And okay, so what's more important? Is it eating well or moving? I mean, you can argue both, but we can control both, right? That's in our control, what we put into our body and how much we stand up and move. And so I'll always go down okay, let's do the food part of this. Let's look at what is changing people. And when I break it down with my team, we always get down to, well, it's, we're eating too many complex carbs, we're eating too much fast food, we're eating too much. And then we keep breaking it down and it comes down to sugar. Right. And what's interesting in dentistry is that sugar is ultimately our biggest challenge, right? Like, how do we get a cavity in the mouth? Because we eat sugar. How do we get fat? We're eating too much sugar. And that's not the only reason. But that's when you break it down, that's a big part of it. Yep. And then I always change it and I say, okay, so do we believe that eating too much sugar over a period of time decreases our overall health and would cause us to die earlier? And most people are like, yeah, I mean, if you eat too much sugar over a period of time, your overall health will decrease. I said, do you also agree that smoking decreases our health and would cause us to decrease our overall life expectancy? People will say, yeah, I agree with both of those. I say, okay, so now you're going over to your best friend's house for dinner. What do you take? And they're like, wine or dessert? I'm like, would you take them a pack of smokes? And they're like, no, I wouldn't take anybody a pack of smokes. That's ridiculous. Yeah. I was like, but you just told me that sugar decreases people's life expectancy and smoking decreases people's life expectancy. So why would you take them a cake or a bottle of wine? And all of a sudden the light goes off and I'm like, look, we got to live life in moderation. Dessert is part of everybody's life. I'm not saying don't ever eat sugar. I used to be hard on my team, to be completely honest. I used to say, you can't bring sugar for anybody else. So if it's somebody's birthday, you can make something, but you can make healthy desserts. Like there are ways to make stuff that's healthy, but you can't bring anybody else sugar because you're killing them. You get to choose. If you want to drink a Coke yourself, I can't stop you. I can stop you from bringing in a 6-pack of Coke and giving it out to people. I'm not as crazy about it anymore, to be completely honest, but I want people to understand that. It's another part of like that whole improving yourself. And what I also tell people is there's one change that you could make in your life that is more important than any other change to do with your health. Do you want to take a guess? It's an interesting one. It's actually not a difficult one, but it's an interesting one. One change that you could make that would change your overall health more than anything else.
I mean, if I had to guess, like in this moment, I would say like, digital health, right? In terms of not like putting your phone away, like putting it on grayscale, something that would be my guess for the modern world. And
so perfect. And that is part of it when we go into mental, and I'm kind of staying more on the physical because the mental is
okay.
The part. Yeah. But the interesting thing about it is just never eat out. That's it. That would be the only if you cook at home only and you bring yourself lunch to work, you will be healthier than everybody else out there because you can't put enough crap in the food that you eat. Like you just can't physically put that many different things that you can't even pronounce into food, but anybody else can do that. So it's another little thing that I'm working on because I've fallen off the bandwagon. So when I have these conversations, you're now like holding me accountable to like get better at like, hey, I need to work out a little bit more and I need to eat a little bit better because I got a 3 and a 5-year-old. And how I show up for them is how they see the world as well. And so when I'm sitting on the couch, which I do very often, and I watch sports, guess what they do? They sit on the couch and they watch sports with me. When I'm like, hey, let's go out for a walk, they're like, this is great. Let's go to the park. Like, they're having a blast. But dad needs to get his butt off the couch to make it happen, right? So it's an interesting thing, but you want to teach the next generation and the people around you how to do better.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, we moved to a small town, 5 years ago, right? And there's just not a lot of places to eat out. I mean, there are, I guess, but it's also like, it's sustained by tourism. So you go out and you're like, I can't spend $100 on every meal. Like there's no fast food and whatever. So it's like, literally, we just can't go out. And I've never felt healthier, and some of it is just forced, right? Because there's just no options. But it's such an easy way to say, like, how do you eat healthier? Just like, well, if you cook at home more, right? And I think that's, a great way of thinking about it. So I love it. So I'm fascinated by this. Like, we can continue this conversation all day. So I want to ask you, like, this specific part of, you've given us some kind of good front end upstream, like, hey, here's how I think about, continuously improving myself and staying healthy, and preventive kind of, don't eat sugar, right? Or don't smoke, right? But so we all get to the place where we're feeling overwhelmed, burned out, stressed, whatever. What do you do? And maybe, importantly as well, like, how are you helping your team or encouraging them to find reconnection, to find rootedness, to find groundedness when they're feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, et cetera? But maybe speak to yourself as well there.
Yeah. So no, that's great. I mean, it is one of the interesting things that, like, our team, what's going on in the world right now, it's tough to, like, be a part of anything, right? And social media, we know, probably one of the biggest detriments to society, realistically, even though we love it and we use it. And, I wouldn't have known you if it wasn't for some form of social media. I wouldn't be here. So, there's definitely an advantage in social media, but there's a lot of stuff that's not great out there. So for us, connection's a big part of it. And how do you connect with people, right? And so what we talk about is, what is the biggest fear in life? The biggest fear in life, at least, like when you break it down, is rejection. The biggest fear in life is rejection. And that's one of the big things that's causing some of these mental challenges that we're having, is that people are disconnected. And when you're disconnected, you could feel rejected, or people can start these groups and, like, look at the bullying. It's all cyberbullying now. And you're pushing somebody out. You're rejecting somebody. And that is really hard on the mental. And so for us, it's the connection piece. We really spend a lot of time trying to connect with our team. So closing the office down to have those, things like what we just did. So just last month, we closed all of our offices down and went to camp. Like, literally, like camp, like you go for when you were a kid. We thought about it. And we're like, who didn't love going to camp? Yeah. So we had to close half the offices at a time because the camp couldn't take 200.
I was going to say, that's a lot of people at one camp, right?
So we did a Sunday night into Monday, and we had half the teams, and then we had Monday night into Tuesday. And so me and my team, we stayed up there for both nights. Yeah. But we did camp. And guess what? We did 1 hour of lecture and 7 hours of just, like, being with nature and doing these high rope courses and going for a hike and doing these low and connecting with the team in nature. Like, because how cool is that? And, like, where you live, and we're just so lucky in Alberta. Like, we drove 45 minutes, an hour out of town, and it's gorgeous out there. We were there in September, so the fall colors, the water, but it's taking time to slow down, to speed up. And I think dentists get so concerned with production, so concerned with, like, hey, if I close my office, I'm losing money. And somebody once asked me, I was just at a conference recently, it might have actually been Dykema. And somebody's like, so you close 18 offices 3 days a year? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, how much does that cost you? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, I've never done the calculation. So we sat there with this person. We're like, well, let's just, like, for fun, calculate it out. And we calculated it to be $750,000 over 3 days of lost production. Yeah. And they're like, how does that make any sense? And I'm like, what we get out of it, what our teams get out of it, the motivation that they get, it's unbelievable. Because one of the other things that makes us, I think, completely different as an organization, and especially as a group organization, is that we have no targets in our offices, no budgets in our offices, and no bonuses in our office. So we are never having a conversation about metrics. Metrics don't exist in our offices. And it's like one of the weirdest things when I talk to these larger groups, but even individual offices, I'm like, when you talk to a hygienist and something's not going right, what do you tell them? They're like, oh, we talk about how they're not meeting their production targets. How does that help your patient? Because why are we doing dentistry, right? I think as dentists, we get so caught up in the daily that we forget why we chose to be dentists, like why you did some of the stuff that you did as a dentist, and then why you got out. Why did you do it? Well, we want to help. Ultimately, we want to make patients healthier. That's you'd be silly to get into dentistry if you didn't really care about that, because it's not that much. It's hard a lot of times, right? It's not that much fun, and patients don't like you. The average dentist is not liked. So we want to help people get better. And so how do we break that down? How do we make it easy? And so when you take metrics out, when you take numbers out, and you just say, your goal is to connect with the patient. And I think this is in dentistry where we're the luckiest people out of pretty much every field out there. Like when COVID was happening, people had to come in to see the dentist. You could do a virtual doctor conversation. You could try to do a virtual dental conversation, but I mean, that's really not going to get anywhere. But like most businesses could go virtual. We had to come to work because we can only do dentistry when we touch somebody. And I think it's the biggest benefit that we have as being dentists. We are within 2 feet of all of our patients. And there's a connection there, right? Just the physical connection of being around people and being around your team. And, you know, I joke about it because I'm like, you need to touch your patient appropriately. Appropriately. But like we get to literally make connections with our patients that very few people in industry actually, in just like the world actually get to do. It's rare that actually happens.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, you answered my next question, but that's okay because I'm going to like tag on to it, right? So my question for you was, what's one thing that happens in TREC dental practices to make the experience feel radical, which is one of my favorite words in the English language, right? Like means rooted. Why we all, you know, it's like I talk all the time about like, hey, this is why we do what we do is because we want to be in relational relationships with people, right? And relational relationships. We want to be in relationship with people. And that's, you know, we want to be kind. We want to be compassionate. We want to show empathy, do all those things. So you explained, hey, we don't do this and your goal is connection. Tell me just a little bit about, you know, walk me upstream of that of like, why did you do that? And then just give me like a little bit on the back end of, okay, so like how, you know, what does that look like day to day then for them? Like what does morning huddle look like if you're not talking about, hey, here's what your production target for the day is? Like how does that kind of play out in, you know, just the day to day at a TREC dental practice?
And this is a big passion of mine because I think in dentistry we've gotten so much into the business of dentistry, the selling dentistry, and it's like we got to stop that. I mean, I truly believe it. Like it drives me bananas when people are talking about that because yes, there is a business. I mean, we are running businesses and we need to make money. We need to pay our staff and we want to, you know, live a good life and do stuff. But how do we take care of our patients and our team so that we're successful? So one of the books that I think is transformational on this is called Drive by Daniel Pink. And he talks about the motivation for people. And it's true. People don't leave jobs. They leave bosses. It's not about money. It is about money to some extent. But if you're in the range of paying your hygienist a fair amount, whatever that is in your local area, paying the assistant a fair amount, the reason they leave you is not for the $1 or the $2 extra. If they're leaving you because of that, you have done something wrong or you're just not a fit. And sometimes you're just not a fit, and that's okay. But realistically, people leave because they don't feel like they're part of an organization. They don't believe in something. And so you need your teams to believe in what you believe in. And hopefully it's good patient care and it's connection and the rest. I don't know. Everybody's got a different belief. But for us, 12, 13 years ago, we removed all bonuses from all of our offices, literally after reading that book. I was on a plane, came back home, read that book, and I'm like, we are not doing bonuses ever again. And, you know, for my parents who had run a successful dental practice for many years, they're like, what are you talking about? We've done bonuses. You know, we learned about the piece of the pie bonus and the quarterly. There's like just so many different ways of doing it. And I said, we want to change the focus. The focus has to be team and has to be patient. And as soon as we took that out, we still paid our team very well. So they were paid a fair amount of money. What we did is I joked with them. We paid them their bonus up front because their average bonus was $2 an hour. So we came back in January and I just said, everybody gets a $2 raise. Bonuses are done. Staff's really happy. I'm like, we are not talking about numbers ever again in the office. We are talking about optimal patient health. Guess how they felt? Because when you try to get them to hit a number, it's not really in their best interest.
Right.
I mean, I'm not even saying that it's not in the patient's interest. It actually could be if
totally.
the right thing over and over again. But it's so much better to have a conversation with the patient about how are you doing? You know, we need to get you in every 3 to 4 months because we're seeing some larger pockets, and that's what's important. And if they believe that you just care about them and you're not trying to get them in every 3 to 4 months because there's a number at the end of that and what that ends up meaning, it's an easier conversation. And when we have our team leads, like I do a new employee orientation. So every quarter, I spend 4 hours with every new hire and I run the whole orientation with them. And I always ask the question because there might be an office manager that's in there or a new dentist. And I'm like, hey, so-and-so, what's your target for the month? And like, if it's a doc, they're looking at me and they're like, I'm sorry, man. I was like, I don't know the answer to that. I should know the answer to this question. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm like, thank God that's what you said. Because there's another 10 people in the room expecting them to say something. And they're like, and I'm like, exactly. There is you don't have a target as a dentist. You don't have a target as an assistant. Because I remember when I was doing dentist, and I still do, I'm doing dentistry, but my mom would be like, oh, you have a $4,500 target. You have a $5,000 target. And I'm like, it doesn't change the way I do anything ever.
Yeah.
So let's stop talking about it. And let's just talk about how to make sure we have an organization where people like seeing us, where they want to come back because we've created that relationship. And that was something that Dad did so well. Is like he knew everybody's first name. He knew everybody's last name. He knew their kids. Well, and we're in a small, I mean, back then it was a small community. Calgary's a lot bigger. But 40 years ago, you'd go to the grocery store and half the people you ran into were your patients because there's only so many dentists in that area. But you knew everybody and you knew what was going on. And that was the reason people still come and see us today, because of Dad's relationship with them 30 years ago.
That's amazing.
Now my patients, because they just believe that I'm as good as my dad because I'm my father's son, right? It's not always true.
Hey, you know what? So it's value there.
That connection is so important. And I think you can run successful dental practices and remove the numbers and still be super successful. Because as an organization, I mean, we're having our best year ever. Like literally things are going really well for us. And we're doing it the right way, and our teams are happy. And again, it's stressful. Don't get me wrong. We don't go to work. Totally. It's not all, it's not all flowers and unicorns. I mean, we have to do work and it's tough, but we do our best to support the people around us.
I mean, there's so much here that you've talked about that really does a good job of tying who you are as a company and what you believe in, right, to how you operate in a day-to-day fashion that I think is pretty unique, I would say, in my understanding of the dental industry in general. And I think going back to some of what we talked about earlier is my last question for you. As we think about you found very concrete ways of producing social good and kind of the common good, right? Not in a like common as in a like normal, but common as in a like public square type of way, right? So I would just love to hear your vision for that, right? Like you found how to do that within TREC Dental and in your community. What is your view and vision for what dentistry's role is in producing common good, social good? If you look down the road 30 years and say, hey, here's the impact I think dentistry could make, what is that? Like, give us just some insight into that.
Yeah, well, ultimately, I think it's our responsibility. And so I look at it as a responsibility versus a nice to do. Like, I actually think that we have a responsibility to help people because we can. We have a skill set that very few people have. I mean, only dentists can do the stuff that we end up doing. And so I think we have a responsibility to our patients, a responsibility to people that can't afford dentistry, because I think that that's really important too. Yeah. And I think it's important locally, and I think it's important internationally, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But I think that also we just have a responsibility to give back. And when you look at, how many dentists are there in North America? Like thousands, hundreds of thousands of dentists. If we all just did something, just helped a few people, right? Like worked with your local shelter, worked with your, and figure out a way that you can do it that's not disruptive. Because I get it. Like, we don't want to change our schedule. Like schedules are challenging. Like dentistry is still tough, but there's little things that we can do to help people make that difference. But if we as an organization, because here's the thing, what does the average person think of a dentist? Right? Like, we charge a lot of money, we take a lot of money, we cause a lot of pain. And why is that? We've created that ourselves. Like, here's the problem with these social norms and the way that people see things. You had to create it. People didn't just come up with it. Now, whether it's still true today as to what it was before, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah. We have to change that ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Like one thing that people come into, we do our new patient exam completely different than most dentists. We start in a consult room. Nobody is met in a clinical setting ever.
Yep.
And the first thing that any patient says to me is, I hate the dentist. And I joke with them. I'm like, this is a tough way to start a relationship. You're stuck with me for the next hour. I'm like, that's not going to build, and we try to joke about it a little bit because they do.
Yeah, totally.
They've taught to, or they've had bad experiences in the past. We can change that. We have the ability as dentists and as team members to change that. But when we're running the mill of dentistry, of just trying to get people in, running 2 or 3 columns, like I'm against multi-column dentistry as well. I like to run 1 column of patients because I'm only focused on the one person. I do it really effectively and really efficiently. So be really quick and good at your procedure, but not run 2 columns of stuff. Because the problem is when you're running multiple columns, you're thinking about something else. Oh, I got to go see this person, then I got to go see this person. I freeze here, then I go there. I tell my docs, if you freeze a patient and you don't have a patient in the other chair, what are you doing? They're like, I don't know. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to sit there and talk to the patient. Like that's literally all you get to do is you don't have to leave the operatory. that freezing takes 5 minutes, but what if I didn't have anything else to do? What if I didn't have to go on social media and check my Instagram account? What if I just sat there in the operatory and got to know the patient better? Do you think the patient is going to come back? And do you think the patient is going to trust you? Because ultimately, trust is the foundation of any relationship. And trust is built with time. It's impossible to build trust just to say, I need you to trust me. That's not going to work. The more time I spend with you, the more you'll trust me. So give your patients that extra little time. And then I'm going to go one more step, and I'm going to talk a little bit about overseas because I'm passionate about.
Great. Love it.
I've done 15 overseas missions. I'm back to Guatemala in February.
Nice.
But here's the social responsibility piece that I think, it touches me, but it's because of how it's affected my life. And so, I've always thought we help people. We go and do these socially responsible. We go on these trips. And so 8 years ago, I was off to Peru on a trip to go do dentistry with one of my business partners. He's like, hey, come to Peru with me. You've gone to Guatemala so many times. He's like, do something different. I was like, great. I'm still going to go to Guatemala this year, but I'm going to tag on a second trip because you really want me to go to Peru. And so I went to Peru with him. And lo and behold, there was this beautiful hygienist on this trip that lived in Edmonton, 3 hours north. And we met on the trip. We dated. We got married. And we have 2 beautiful boys. And look at what the world gives you when you give with no expectation. I wasn't going on a trip to Peru to go find my future wife. I was going to do dentistry to help people. And what the world gave back to me was this, it literally changed my life. In every aspect of it. It's just interesting to see when you just take that out, when you're like, hey, let me just give to give. And here's the crazy thing. You go on these trips, you've done them before. You come back, you're changed.
Oh,
like
100%.
The patients you helped, it's actually more for you than it is for them. Ultimately, you change, but the world gives you a lot of stuff when you just slow down. You take a few extra steps. You don't try to run the rat race that we're all used to doing, and you just say, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to care a little bit more. I'm going to take care of my team a little bit more. I'm going to take care of the patient just a little bit better. We're going to talk about overall health, not just that DO that you need to do on your mouth, and then you just turn around and say, how can we help others? Because look at what the world will do. And so to me, ultimately, if we can do that a little bit more, I think as an organization of dentistry, we will just be ultimately so much more successful.
That's a beautiful way of putting a bow on this episode, Jan. Thank you so much for sharing so much here today that I am just super inspired by, super motivated by. I hope, tons of our listeners are going to be out there taking what you're saying and putting it into practice. If they want to learn more from you, obviously super passionate about this. There's lots online that, I was able to find even before we talked. How do they get in touch with you? How do they find out more about TREC Dental? If they're inspired today by this conversation, tell us more to go.
To be honest, LinkedIn, just find me, Jan Jaffer on LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm on Instagram, Dr. TREC on Instagram. Reach out. I love it when you hear from dentists that are interested in learning more. You love those conversations, right? Because of this and these conversations and the stuff that I've done, I was just in Vegas lecturing on how to run a better organization without metrics. And that's what they brought me down to do. And they're bringing me down again to now talk to their team members because the dentists there were like, wow, this is so different than all the business courses and all the stuff that I do. So find me online. Like I said, I love talking about this. Thank you, Matt, for the opportunity, because the more I get to talk about this, my hope is that more people listen, and you've got a different audience than I have. And so, more people will hear about this. And if it changes 1 or 2 people, I think we're both ultimately successful if a couple of people do a little bit better. Right. So,
yes, 100%, a big believer in that. And really just appreciate you taking the time today to join us, to share so much and for being so thoughtful, right? It's easy sometimes to, self-promote, do some of those things on podcasts, right? Whatever. And we try to not have those conversations. We try to just have hey, here's what I really care about. And it's obviously come through in this conversation of just how passionate you are about this. And so I'm just really grateful as someone, from afar, witnessing what you're doing, just really grateful for the passion in which you are, going out there every day and just being authentic with your team, with yourself, et cetera. It really is unique and really a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Awesome. I appreciate the opportunity. I really do.
Sweet.